Want to tell you about a couple of our sponsors, and we're going right back to G. Edward Griffin. He's really an archaeologist, going back into the congressional record, going into the foundation's own records, and showing you the embryonic development of what has grown into this monster today. That's coming up in one moment. I want to tell you about EcuadorCentral.com. You know the country Ecuador? EcuadorCentral.com. It's your duty to know every option you have to protect you and your family, whether you're looking for a rental property, a new start, or you just want to know your options. I urge you to go to EcuadorCentral.com. The website is great. I will give you all the information you want to know before you go. They will give it to you at EcuadorCentral.com. Go there and see what folks are doing. Whether you are interested in real estate investment, travel, or just want to see pictures and videos, go to EcuadorCentral.com. That's EcuadorCentral.com. Also, MySolarBackup.com. A lot of things can cut off your electrical power: hurricanes, snow, ice storms. Listeners should move towards getting off the grid. And here's a good way to do just that. A solar power generator is now available from our longtime sponsor, Solutions from Science. You get an emergency power backup kit, which consists of the power source 800-watt generator and a high-efficiency solar panel designed to provide endless electricity. Remember, too, that gas generators need gas. But in a blackout, gas pumps can't pump gas because they run on electricity. It's the perfect emergency backup for troubled times. The government doesn't own the sun yet, folks, so make your move now. Go to MySolarBackup.com. That's MySolarBackup.com. Or give them a call toll-free at 877-327-0365. MySolarBackup.com. Okay, G. Edward, you're getting into the Reese Committee, reading the testimony of Norman Dodd, this high-powered investigator hired by Congress. You have the actual foundation documents that we know of as the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, later the Ford Foundation. They're now quite public about all this, and I want you to go through the testimony first and then into modern times, but here's a microcosm example. Eco-barons lead the way. Times of London today. And it says the global rich are going green as never before. The first Sunday Times Green Rich list shows that enthusiasm among the world's wealthiest for investments in areas as diverse as electric cars, solar power, and geothermal energy is unaffected by recession. So they always say, oh, it's about better cars and things that sound reasonable. But when you actually read the minutes of these meetings that have been covered by the media, it's population control. How do we shut off the resources? How do we destroy the industrial society? How do we bring back a neo-feudal type of serfdom to control everyone? And here's another Times of London. Billionaire club and bid to curb overpopulation. America's richest people meet to discuss ways of tackling disastrous environmental, social, and industrial threats. And at the end of the article, it says the Rockefeller Foundation put it on at Rockefeller University. It was secret, but they told the Times some of what happened. And they said, why all the secrecy? They wanted to speak rich to rich without worrying anything they could, and said would end up in the newspapers, painting them as an alternative world government, he said, because this meeting went on a week before Bilderberg this year. Now, you then see the Rockefeller Foundation as the nexus or the directorship, and you're the expert on this, I'm just telling the listeners about it, of all the new carbon tax laws where they decide who can have a business, where they decide what gets developed, what governments fund. This is the private banking cartel through government power in a tyrannical fashion, taking complete control over society. Please continue.
Yes, well, boy, there's so much on that, and it all, as you said earlier, it goes back to the earliest beginnings, of which I'm aware, where they actually talked about these strategies, was when the tax-exempt foundations amassed tremendous amounts of financial firepower. I mean, we're talking about, as you mentioned, the Carnegie Endowment Fund for International Peace, the Rockefeller Foundation Fund, the Ford Foundation. People cannot imagine the tremendous amount of money that these tax-exempt foundations have in their bank accounts and invested in producing constant flow of money. And they use it, the general impression is that they use it for philanthropic purposes. But now we're talking about Norman Dodd, who started to investigate these organizations and found out that under the name of, or the cover of philanthropy, they were actually doing social engineering, and they were doing a government change, and they were trying to change the characteristic of the American society. And that was quite astounding. And when I read this testimony, I just found it almost impossible to believe. And so I was traveling in those days back to Virginia, and we had hired a television crew, and we were putting together a little documentary on some topic. It wasn't this at all. I've even forgotten the topic at the present time. But I do know that we had a weekend where we had no appointments and no interviews. And so I decided to see if I could locate Norman Dodd, because I knew the last reference I had, they said he lived in Virginia someplace. And so I just opened up the telephone directory and started to look through to see if I could find how many Norman Dodds there were. There were only about 3. And so I decided to call the first one on the list, and it was him. It was almost incredible. Good luck. I said, Mr. Dodd, are you the same one who was the investigator for the Reese Committee? He said, yes, that is I. And I said, well, how wonderful. I'm here. I have a camera crew, and I'm interested in your testimony. Would you like to speak for our cameras? He said, well, of course, young man, of course. This is many years ago. And so we got him over to where we were staying, and I actually captured his whole story on videotape. And it was a good thing, because by that time he was advanced in years, and he was not very well at all. And it wasn't, I think it was less than a year later that he passed away. So we were fortunate enough to get his testimony again, this time spoken to our cameras. And I had a chance to question him. So I became very, very personally familiar with his story. And I might say that if anybody is interested in this, you can find the complete description of what he said, and you can find even a reference to the film, the documentary film, which we produced based on his testimony, which is called The Hidden Agenda. And you can find all of that on our website. In fact, since we're talking about documents, I think a good reference point would be to come to the Freedom Force website. That's freedomforceinternational.org. And when you get there to the landing page, you'll see across the top a subsection called The Issues. And if you'll just navigate to the issues, and at the bottom of that page, you'll see a series of essays and references which include almost all of the documents that we're talking about, Alex, including the Norman Dodd testimony.
Absolutely, and people can also Google Norman Dodd, and the video is out on the web, but it's all the key info is there at the Freedom Force website. We'll give that all out before you leave us again as well. We also have Carol Quigley, and I want to speak some about that and then get into what's currently happening as we come down to the end game. And suddenly they go from denying their plans that they were building behind the curtains. Now they're launching this warmock, this juggernaut against it. So they've unveiled it, and they are pushing it and telling everybody how great it is and how wonderful it is and how fantastic it is. So let's discuss terms here, because we start talking about a communist conspiracy. People think it's a bunch of guys in black uniforms running around in Russia 100 years ago. Can you explain to people why the ultra-rich always fund wealth-transferring programs and always bill it and paint it and package it as if it's a revolution of the people, and why ultra-rich make their wealth and keep their wealth and expand their wealth through monopolies, through collectivist governments in all their forms? Because people go, communism, why are the rich funding it? Why do the rich love communist China so much? Explain that to people.
Yeah, it's really looking at the wrong place if you're asking why the super rich are collectivists or gravitate into government. They're really the rich aspect of their characteristics is not the main thing. Is they're power mad people. And money is one of the most important levers of power. And so power-mad people, these control freaks, the predator class, in different ways of saying the same thing, they will gravitate toward any mechanism of power. Well, that's government, isn't it? If you can control the levers of governmental power, you can really control the population, and you can have all the money. So it's kind of a merger. And they can pretend to be collectivists on the left or collectivists on the right. It makes no difference. Right and left wings are merely two wings of the same ugly bird, which is collectivism. And like any wings on a bird, they'll flap against each other in order to fly. You need both wings to fly, so there's the appearance of conflict, so that politically speaking, all the dum-dums down at the bottom of this mechanism think that they're participating in their own political destiny because they can go to the polls and they can vote the rascals out and vote Republican this time. Oh, we don't like that. We'll go vote Democrat the next time. And the two wings beat against each other, and the bird flies. And so that's true not only in our country, but it's true around the world, and it's true through much of modern history, that the conflict, that the big major conflicts of the world of which we're familiar, World War I, World War II, and the conflict that goes on today, which I would call World War III, it's now going on, is a conflict to a large extent between two branches of world collectivism.